At work, a simple careless moment can turn into a tragedy. Sometimes all it takes is one wrong step, one glance at the wrong time, or one thoughtless decision to turn a regular shift into a nightmare. From factories to offices, from trains to construction sites, human error does not choose a place or a profession. And when it happens in dangerous environments, the consequences can be brutal. These are the cases you are going to see today. Avelino Naimog, 49 years old, was working calmly at a tire repair shop in the city of Espigao do Este, in the state of Rondônia, in Brazil. It seemed like just another ordinary day of changing a tire, but a single second of bad luck was enough for everything to get out of control. While he was inflating the tire of a truck, the compressed air turned into an enemy. The tire exploded with such force that it threw Avelino far away, giving him no chance to react. The people who were nearby were startled by the noise, which sounded like a bomb. Some ran to see what had happened, others stayed where they were, not understanding anything. When help arrived, there was nothing left to do. The worst part is that no one could explain the reason for the explosion. The tire seemed to be in good condition, and the equipment was working normally. The case caught the attention of everyone who works in repair shops, because it shows how a simple lapse can turn into a tragedy. A tire, which everyone thinks is harmless, ended up taking the life of an experienced man. It was supposed to be just another quiet shift at a packaging factory, but it ended in tragedy. The employee, who worked in the storage area, was hit by a forklift after a simple lapse, the kind of mistake no one imagines could cost their own life. The operator of the machine, distracted while making a maneuver, did not realize that she was behind the vehicle. The worst part is that the equipment ran over the woman, leaving everyone in the warehouse in despair. Colleagues ran to help her, trying to understand what had happened. Many started shouting for help. Others tried to move the forklift, but it was already too late. To this day, there is no clear information about whether she was taken alive to the hospital. It was the first day of work for Lawrence Daquan Davis, a 21-year-old young man, full of eagerness to start his life. He had just been hired as a temporary worker at the Bacardi factory in Jacksonville, in Florida. He barely had time to get used to the new uniform. About an hour and a half after the start of the shift, he was already cleaning up broken rum bottles underneath a giant machine called a palletizer. The job of the equipment was to stack boxes of drinks, but it kept having problems. The floor was sticky from so much spilled rum, and the broken bottles formed a carpet of glass. The operator told Davis to sweep up the mess underneath, and that is when everything went wrong. While the young man was inside the structure, the machine was turned on again. In a matter of seconds, the weight of almost 2 tons came down on him. The supervisor tried to raise the platform, called for help, shouted for assistance, but nothing worked. Davis lost his life crushed, without even understanding what had happened. Although there was a safety system, almost no one used it because it slowed down the work. A stupid mistake, a pointless rush, and a kid who just wanted to work ended up paying the highest price possible. Edmar de Oliveira, 35 years old, left the city of Ouro Preto do Oeste, in Brazil, to work on a road project in the city of Porto Velho, in the state of Rondônia, in Brazil. It was just another day in the Chao Poeira project, which was paving the streets of the city. Everything was going well until a lapse ended up costing dearly, and the ending was tragic. While he was walking along the road, Edmar seemed distracted, maybe trying to avoid something on the ground. The problem is that behind him, there was a huge road roller coming, one of those machines that weigh tons. The operator did not notice the worker in its path and kept going. The result was terrible. The machine ran over him without giving any time to react. The colleagues who were nearby ran in desperation, but it was already too late. The worst thing is that the area was full of signs, and no one understood how he did not notice the danger. Some said that Edmar was trying to talk to another worker. Others think he did not hear the noise of the machine. It was late afternoon in An Khe, in the province of Tay Binh in Vietnam, when a simple drainage job turned into real chaos. 3 workers were sweating under the sun, fixing the sewer system of the village, while an excavator operator tried to speed up the job. The problem is that the guy got carried away with the machine and dug deeper than he should, and what was supposed to be just a hole turned into a disaster. With a dry crash, the tall wall that stood beside the construction site suddenly collapsed, crashing down on top of the 3 workers. The people who were watching the work ran like crazy, shouting for help. Luckily, everyone survived, but they came out from under the rubble looking like they had fought with a truckload of bricks. The excavator operator still tried to justify himself, saying that the wall was already old, but the damage showed that the mistake was really due to carelessness. Everything could have been avoided with a little more attention. In the end, the trio left injured, the wall came down, and the fright stayed as a memory. A senseless mistake, one dig too many, and the workday almost became the last day of their lives. In the Russian city of Naberezhny Chelny, inside the giant KAMAZ factory, famous for producing heavy trucks, an ordinary day turned into a tragedy that looked like something out of a movie. It was November of the year 2020, and the cold in Tatarstan made anyone want to put on the thickest coat in the closet. The problem is that this simple coat ended up being the worst enemy of a veteran worker of 65 years. He had been working in the same place for more than 40 years, taking care of the machines with the patience of someone who already knew everything by heart. That morning, he was operating a lathe, a machine used to shape metal. Everything was going fine until his coat touched the rotating part of the machine. In a matter of seconds, the fabric was pulled with such force that it dragged the worker along without any chance to react. The colleague who was nearby panicked and ran to turn off the equipment, but it was too late. The lathe kept spinning, indifferent, as if nothing had happened. The worst part is that everyone knew that this kind of clothing was forbidden near the machine, but the cold beat the rule. After that, the factory management held meetings, promised to review protocols, and reinforce safety. But in the end, it was clear that a simple lapse and a coat at the wrong time cost the life of a man who knew every corner of that factory. Francisco Gildson de Oliveira knew every part of the Villar metals plant in the city of Sumaré in Brazil. He had 26 years of service, and right on his first day back from vacation, he ended up in one of the biggest ordeals ever seen in a factory. The worker, 45 years old, was a production leader and was handling a high-pressure machine, one of those that demand extra care even to look at from up close. While he was removing an iron bar, something went wrong. An oil leak is believed to have been the cause. In seconds, the machine reacted with an explosion that no one could contain. The noise was so loud that it stopped the entire production line. When help arrived, there was nothing left to do. Colleagues said he was careful, but that machine seemed not to forgive mistakes. The company regretted what happened, promised to help the family, and said that the video of the accident, which ended up being shared online, should not have been released. Now, the civil police are investigating whether there was a safety failure. The worst part is that all of this started with a simple technical detail and ended up taking the life of a man who had dedicated almost 3 decades to the same factory floor. Cicero Conceição dos Santos, 53 years old, had worked for years at a tire retreading company at the Amargosa Junction in the city of Santo Antônio de Jesus in Brazil. That morning, he was doing what he always did, walking around the factory area, watching the movement. No one imagined that just a few steps would be enough to change everything. While a colleague was operating a machine known as a tire shredder, one of the metal parts came loose with absurd force. The noise was so loud that it sounded like an explosion. Shards flew in every direction and hit Cicero directly. He fell before anyone could understand what was happening. Colleagues ran to help, but it was already too late. Cicero was not wearing any protective equipment at that moment. The police confirmed that the machine was regulated within the operating period and that the accident was the result of an unexpected failure. However, the lack of protective equipment became a point of investigation. For those who saw the scene, there was that mixture of shock and disbelief. It was a simple mistake, the kind that many people think will never cost anything. But in that factory by the roadside, a lapse ended up turning into a tragedy. In Yidu, in the province of Hubei, in China, a bizarre accident inside a sand depot ended up turning into a tragedy. The employee, who was helping to guide the unloading of a truck, was standing in a completely blind spot for the excavator operator. The problem started when the truck got stuck, and she got too close to the machine to try to solve the situation. The operator, distracted and, according to comments, messing with his cell phone, thought the area was clear. As soon as he lowered the excavator bucket, he lifted a huge amount of sand, and without realizing it, also lifted his coworker. In a few seconds, she was dumped, along with the pile of sand, into the opening of the equipment and disappeared. When the man noticed something strange and went to check, it was already too late. The woman had lost her life by asphyxiation. The city's safety supervision department confirmed the cause, but some specialists found the whole thing very strange. They believed that the opening where she fell looked more like that of a rock crusher than of a simple sand depot. The worst part is that everything could have been avoided. All it would have taken was a little more attention, and maybe less time staring at the cell phone. A trivial mistake ended up costing dearly, turning a simple work morning into a disaster that is hard to accept. In a steel plant in China, a worker ended up becoming part of his own job. He was doing maintenance on a machine when a portion of melted steel, coming out of the furnace, went straight at him. The impact was so strong that the man was swallowed by the hot metal, getting stuck to an iron structure. Those who were nearby said that everything happened in seconds. The steel, still boiling, hit the worker and wrapped around him completely, as if the heat had a life of its own. When colleagues ran to help, it was already too late. The man was charred, with smoke rising. The worst part is that no one could confirm whether the equipment had been turned off before the maintenance. Some workers said he tried to fix the machine while it was still on, which is the kind of mistake anyone would swear they would never make. But on that day, bad luck mixed with carelessness. At Miller Park in Milwaukee, in the United States of America, what was supposed to be just another workday turned into a mess worthy of a disaster movie. A giant crane, called Big Blue, 173 meters tall, was lifting a piece that weighed 450 tons when everything collapsed. There was so much metal falling that the noise sounded like the end of the world.
Shit!
Up there were three workers: Jeffrey Wisher, 40 years old, William DeGrave, 39, and Jerome Starr, 52. The trio was part of an experienced team, but that day, the wind decided to play the villain. Even with strong gusts, they decided to continue the lift. The worst part is that the crane swayed, lost its balance, and took the platform where the men were standing along with it, plunging from almost 90 meters. Engineer Mike Duckett said that when he arrived at the site, the men were already covered with tarps. He said it was the saddest day of his career. Investigations concluded that the crane toppled because of the wind and the rush to finish the job. A simple mistake that cost lives and left a $100 million stadium in ruins. Stephen Dierkes, 39 years old, was on his fifth day of work at the Caterpillar Mapleton Foundry in the state of Illinois, in the United States of America, when a simple trip turned into a tragedy. He was taking a sample of melted iron when he lost his balance and fell straight into a cauldron at more than 1,400 degrees Celsius. Part of him stayed on the floor, and the rest turned to ash instantly. The accident happened around 9 o'clock in the morning, and those who saw the scene never forgot it. The iron bubbled while colleagues tried to understand what had happened. One employee said that Stephen did not seem to have enough training to be there. The worst part is that it had not even been a full week since he had started the job. Authorities confirmed that everything was accidental. The coroner stated that there was no crime, only a fatal mistake in an environment where a misstep can be very costly. The place already had a history of tragedies. Months earlier, another worker had fallen from a ladder and also lost his life. Even so, the work went on as usual. It was another ordinary workday at the steel cable factory. The noise of the machines was already part of the routine. One of the operators approached one of the giant reels to check on a detail, a quick movement just to take a look. The problem is that small lapse turned into a nightmare. The man ended up getting stuck between the moving parts. He tried to free himself, but the equipment did not forgive him. The machine kept closing in, slow and relentless, until the worst happened. After the accident, the entire sector stopped. Some colleagues said he always used to say that machine was scary, but he never imagined that the fear was real. It was a heavy situation for everyone there. In a paper factory, a worker ended up living the worst nightmare of his life. A huge machine began spitting out paper in a strange way, as if it had gone crazy. In the middle of the chaos, one of the employees went in to try to solve the problem and, in a careless moment, ended up falling into it. The colleagues who were nearby panicked and ran to try to turn off the equipment. Some climbed up onto the platforms. Others shouted for help. The noise of the gears, mixed with the workers' desperation, turned the place into total panic. The place, which minutes earlier was full of routine and the sound of production, became a scene of running and shock. After the accident, many said they could no longer look at that machine the same way. Felon Smith, 37 years old, stepped off the Chicago subway platform thinking she had enough time to grab the cell phone that had fallen onto the tracks. The problem is that the train did not wait. She tried to run, but was hit before she could get out of there. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the operator seemed to be in another world. The cameras showed that he took his eyes off the tracks for 12 seconds, enough time to change a life. He laughed and pointed at something out of the side window, completely distracted from what was coming down the line. The Chicago Transit Authority confirmed that the employee was fired for not paying attention to the job. Felon left friends and family in shock. She just wanted to get her cell phone back, but ended up on the list of the most absurd endings caused by carelessness, both hers and the operator's. Inside a foundry in full operation, an employee thought he could save some time. he forgot to remove the little aluminum biscuit that is left over every time the machine finishes a mold. The problem is that the material that was coming next was at more than 1,200 degrees Celsius, and that mixture does not forgive distractions. When the new batch was poured, the pressure made the mold explode. A flash filled the entire place, and the noise sounded like a bomb going off. Workers ran in despair, some trying to shut the machines down, others running away from the heat. The operator, who was right in front, was hit by splashes of melted aluminum and suffered serious burns. Despite the scare and the injuries, no one lost their life. Even so, the mistake was remembered as one of the most absurd blunders ever recorded in an industrial environment. Don't forget to subscribe so you can watch more videos like this.